An old man by the name of Brown McDill was a member of one of the churches I served. And from the very first day that I went there, he was always hounding me about the scripture. He wanted to know why in the world Jesus would act like that. Well, good question, wouldn't you say? The context of the story is that Jesus has wandered far from his familiar territory. It's outside the Jewish territory and inside Tyre and Sidon, which is present-day Lebanon. Perhaps he went there because he had become embattled with the religious scholars and Pharisees over this delicate balance between law and love. It got a little hot, so he traveled into Gentile territory. And there a woman came to him begging for mercy for her daughter, who was suffering terribly from demon possession. At first, Jesus ignores her. It's as if she's invisible and mute, even though it says that she's shouting for mercy. The disciples are equally unsympathetic toward her and urge Jesus to just get rid of her. Who is this Jesus? And why is he acting like this? Bible scholars vary in their opinions because it really is a strange story about Jesus. You can't get around that. And it may be even worse than it superficially appears. She's called a Canaanite woman in the Gospel of Matthew. In Mark, she's called a Syrophoenician woman. Calling her a Canaanite means that she was an indigenous woman, which would have been a common and derogatory term for who she was. When Jesus tells her that he has come only for his own people, she has the gumption to challenge him. He tells her that it's not good to take the children's bread and to toss it to the dogs under the table. He calls her a dog. I thought his mother raised him better than that. This is not an affectionate term, by the by. It's not like she's some cute little lap dog or something, but this is an offensive slur against Gentiles like her. What are we to make of Jesus? I used to tell Brown McDill that in the early church, as it was moving from predominantly Jewish Christians to Gentile Christians, there were a lot of tensions. It was difficult for Jewish Christians to accept Gentile Christians. And Paul later wrote in his epistles about the need for a more excellent way, the way of love, as people came together in community, unity in the midst of diversity. It is as if this story is like a mirror being held up to that early church. Can you imagine Jesus acting that way? No? Then why are you acting that way towards your neighbors who are different from you? I think the gospel writer was trying to tell the reader. This past year, we've all been working on seeing and loving our neighbors. In my Episcopal address, I prefer to look forward, to help to shape us in moving forward together into this next annual conference year. If you'd like to hear my report about what we've done, please read the latest edition of The Reporter or go online to do that. But I want us to look forward and to move forward together. In the center of your table is a brochure that I hope that you'll take home and that will help you to remember what we've talked about here today. Now, many of you are familiar with Lovett Weems, a United Methodist Church consultant. And this is a statement that he is well known for. The United Methodist Church in the United States has a future only to the extent that it can find ways to reach more people, younger people, and more diverse people. I've heard that quote many, many times, but it was just recently when that little phrase, only to the extent that we can reach more people, younger people, and diverse people stood out for me. Our future with hope depends upon our living out this story of Jesus. Just as he had a change of heart towards his neighbor, we all have a heart that needs to continuously be changed toward our neighbors. We are called to reach more people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. As we celebrate 175 years of being an annual conference, we need to remember our history of starting new churches. I like to say that local churches are like turtles. Isn't that a common image? The local church is like a turtle. If you see a turtle on a stump, you know that it didn't get there by itself. If a local church is in existence, you know that a church got some help along the way. It seems like the older the church, and some of you are 175 years old or older, the more we forget that somebody helped us out along the way. And so we need to continue to give to Harvest 2020 so that we can continue to make new church starts. Our goal for this coming year is 9 new faith communities. And in this coming year, we also hope that we will be able to start at least one predominantly African American congregation. But it takes your support. We had a push for Harvest 2020, but we need to continue to make sure that as we reach more people, we are starting new places for new people. Later this week, we're going to celebrate our first charter in a long time. This is a great celebration, and we give thanks for Flowing Grace United Methodist Church. But we also need to continue to strengthen existing congregations. And so our goal is to have at least 12 churches in the turnaround church coaching process. So that people, much like this woman and her daughter, people who are convinced that Jesus Christ has something that will help them in their lives, that they can come to our churches and find there the warm embrace that can transform their lives. Sometimes I think people who are not a part of our congregations believe that even more than we do. And so we need to constantly be made aware of the many ways in which we can help congregations grow in their capacity to reach new people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. The local church is the critical place to call and shape vital Christians through vital congregations. It used to be that people around us were much like us. Everyone knew each other, looked like each other, thought about the same, got their news and their perspectives from the same sources. They lived in the same place all their lives. Is that the way you experience life around you these days? No. Today, all of that has changed. It is as if, like Jesus, we traveled into an unfamiliar place. And if you will, for a moment, let me say that unfamiliar place for many people is called multicultural. Every church in this annual conference is a multicultural church. Can you say, my church is multicultural? Can you say that? Again, my church is multicultural. One more time. My church is multicultural. You may all look the same in your church, but increasingly our cultural differences are based on generations. So if you're blessed to have a number of generations, you're a multicultural church. We have different theological perspectives. There is no congregation in this annual conference or anywhere else where everybody has the same theological perspective. If nothing else, people are in different places in their spiritual journey. That alone will mean that they have different ways of understanding how to live out that faith. This creates a multicultural congregation in every place throughout our annual conference. And to the extent that we can welcome others into our congregations just as they are, we find vitality and hope for the future of our local church and our denomination. Our churches need to be places that not only welcome people who are different from ourselves, but, really they should be like workshops where we learn not just to be nice to each other, but we actually learn to appreciate and to acknowledge those differences and yet live together. Our future as human beings in all of our context for ministry relies upon that. Children growing up will always be in a multicultural environment. We need to teach and to learn and to model along with them what it means to be a part of a multicultural context. Therefore, we do need to grow in our capacity as multicultural congregations and also as cross-racial, cross-ethnic congregations and appointments. All of our churches are multicultural, but that's different from being a cross-racial, cross-ethnic appointment or a cross-racial congregation. When a pastor is appointed to a congregation who is different from the predominant race and ethnicity of that congregation, it's a cross-racial, cross-ethnic appointment. And we need to grow in our capacity to have healthy cross-racial, cross-ethnic appointments because every church is potentially a cross-racial, cross-ethnic appointment. The General Commission on Religion and Race has trained some of our leaders from the Board of Ordained Ministry, the Conference Commission on Religion and Race, and the Cabinet and others to help us as an annual conference to have healthy, cross-racial, cross-ethnic congregations. The approach is based on learning from those who have had this experience. But we also want to help explore how all active clergy can grow in their awareness and ability to help congregations benefit from the diversity in our own communities. As we reach out to those diverse communities, we will experience the growth that Lovett Weems' quote indicates for us. In addition to growing in our capacity as a multicultural congregation, as cross-racial, cross-ethnic appointments, we also know that we need to continue to assess our congregations for greater vitality. We've had a number of tools that we've used over the years, and some of you have used those, but this year we're adding a new one. It's called the CAT. I like the name, the CAT. It's the church assessment tool, the CAT. We're encouraging congregations that are having a transition in pastors to use it. It helps to be able to look at what's going on in your congregation in a little more in-depth way than any of the tools that we've had to date. And we also offer this tool to other congregations who really want to understand what's going on in the congregation and how can we be a more vital congregation in the midst of it. In addition, we'll continue to work through the other tools that we have offered, and many of you have gone to these over the years, but that's why we need to start a new one, because some of you have learned and grown, and you have experienced the vitality that's come out of those, and so it's important that we have yet another tool. Our vitality really comes from developing the vitality of Christians in our congregations. But it's in the local church that vitality is strengthened through discipleship. But it also comes when we reach out to the community around us. We do continue our theme, who is my neighbor? because it continues to challenge us with each new neighbor we meet. The Canaanite woman was an indigenous person in the area where Jesus was. We can't help but be reminded as we come to celebrate 175 years that there were indigenous people here in this area 175 years ago. In fact, it was then that the U.S. militia, aided by our own esteemed President Abraham Lincoln at the time, pushed the Native Americans back with the help with Chief Black Hawk back across the Mississippi River and made it, as the books say, safe for settlers to come to this area. That's why it's 175 years. It coincides. While Methodists in this part of the country were abolitionists, the truth is they were also often very unmerciful towards the Native Americans. We all have much to repent. And we will begin our first act of repentance as an annual conference on September 20th, 2014 in the Naperville area. And I encourage you to learn more about our own history. Our history as a state, as well as a history of our church, as well as to understand the depth of pain that Native Americans still feel for the ways in which they have been treated throughout the years. So there's a totally invisible person in this story, and it's the woman's daughter, a child who is suffering, at this point maybe alone, silently, invisibly, terribly. So how are the children in our communities? This has been a question I have asked throughout my episcopacy. How are the children where you are? Many of them are not doing so well in some of our communities, in many of our families, even in our churches. And I'm asking all United Methodists to make the concern and the care of children a top priority in what it is that we do as part of our outreach. Whether you have children in your church or not, you have children in your communities. And those children need your help. Some children in our communities suffer from the demons of poverty and poverty-related issues, such as hunger, homelessness, even violence, drug and alcohol addiction for themselves or even their parents. They suffer from sexual and domestic violence. They suffer from the lack of a quality education, including a lack of spiritual education. In fact, some of our children, I would say, in our communities and in our families, suffer from spiritual neglect. Like the child in the story about Jesus, they may be silently, invisibly, terribly suffering. But like Jesus, we're called to reach out, to heal and to educate, to love and to give hope to the children in all of our communities. I'm asking that every church have a child advocate who will raise the concerns for both mercy and justice for the children in the community who have no voice. See, children can't vote. They can't vote for the school board. They can't vote for your church budget. At least I've never encountered a church that allowed the children to vote for the budget. What if the children in your church, if you have them, would vote for your church budget? Might they have a few amendments? I'm just asking. You know, and part of the poverty that comes for children is much like that which Mother Teresa used to talk about. A spiritual poverty. So many of our children are alone and lonely, scared, uncertain. They just want to be loved. So maybe you're saying, well, all she cares about are the children. But what I'm saying is that all of us, we need retirees who have a little bit more time to be able to go and mentor a child. We need the United Methodist men. Any United Methodist men here? We need a few good men to go and mentor some children. We need United Methodist women who've always been good on children to really come around them and surround them with love and care. We need everyone to reach out. And when we do, I think we find our own vitality. We find our mission. And you know, we see the fruit of our labor when we hear somebody like Daniel Lee come and talk about just how important it was that the church was a neighbor to him. I encourage every congregation to go and talk to the principal of your local school. Go and find out what they need. Find out what you can do as a congregation to help them, and then listen to what they have to say. Sometimes, you see, we like to do what we want to do. So, for instance, the Chicago Public Schools, they need a mentor for every student in their system. I said, well, if that's your goal, I think I can come up with 100 of them. But you know what? Sometimes we just want to give mittens. They don't want mittens. They want mentors. So listen to what it is that your school needs from you, and then partner with them. Some children need a safe haven. Safe havens are places that they can go during school breaks. They need to be somewhere where they can get something to eat, to continue to learn, and again, simply to be loved. There is nothing more powerful than when an adult truly shows love and concern for a child. Many districts actually have funds to be able to help support those. Go find out if your district does. And then take advantage of it and offer safe haven for the children. Will we, as the United Methodist Church in Northern Illinois, be advocates of mercy and justice for the children in our communities? And when we advocate for children in our communities, I also hope that we'll advocate for children in our churches. Our speaker this week is going to be Diana Butler Bass. And once, quite a while ago in an interview, she said, she was asked what she sees, what she wants from the church. And she says, you know, it really isn't anything that I want because my faith is formed. But what she imagines is a church for her then 8-year-old daughter. She said, I so want the kind of justice-oriented, prayerful, intellectually rigorous, beautiful faith for her that I knew. I want her to experience that in a way that makes sense for her as she lives well into the 21st century. I want that church to be inclusive of her and others, colorblind in the sense of not excluding people who don't look like her, non-sexist, and deeply compassionate in Christian community. I hope it's there for her, she said. And I believe, given what Diana Butler Bass has spent the last decade or more doing, she is working for that kind of church. For us as United Methodists and all kinds of churches, that she's helping us to do that. And I believe that we can be that kind of church. Some children fear for their lives, such as the over 50 children who are under 16 years old and have been shot in Chicago so far this year. We need to literally put ourselves in the community. In Chicago, on Memorial Day weekend, churches of all kinds, including United Methodists, took to the streets to march for peace. Put the guns down was the slogan. On that one night, no young people were shot. Do you still believe that the church can't make a difference? We can. We can make a difference when we stand for children, we get out of our four walls, and when we seek to make a difference in our communities. In Chicago, we continue our Chicago urban strategy around the 4 areas related to poverty. education and literacy, community safety, restorative justice, and food security. So you might be thinking, it's all about Chicago. But you know, one of the interesting things I've learned over this past year, as we have worked on this in the city of Chicago, is that these translate into every community in the Northern Illinois Conference. And so we have begun to branch out a little bit. And we're growing in our capacity to help all churches in all communities begin to address some of these poverty-related areas. Partnerships between churches are important to be able to do this, but we're also calling for a renewed relationship with the United Methodist Agency, United Voices for Children. Each of the agencies has the capacity to help our local churches. It's not just meant to help those people, it's to help us. It's to help us deal within our congregations and in our communities around drug and alcohol addiction. Heroin is killing our children and adults, and I am convinced that many people associated with our United Methodist churches are suffering or have a family member who is suffering also. United Voices for Children can help educate us and help us to be able to reach out. Incarceration is a phenomenon in this area that is hurting many churches and communities. It's not just those people, it's us. And yet, you know, as a pastor, knowing that some members of the congregation had family members in prison, it was never one of the concerns on Sunday morning. I don't ever remember somebody standing up and saying, my son, my granddaughter, my husband, my father has gone to jail. Will you pray for me? And I think that we need help in providing care for families in our churches, as well as families in our communities, as well as helping persons reintegrate into society. And so United Voices for Children is one of the resources to do that. Well, vital congregations mean that there's joy and love in them. That's what vitality is. And I want to give a shout out for that 30-some number of churches who had Spanish as a second language courses this year. How many of you participated? Great. By teaching us adults to learn some Spanish, we not only learn to appreciate our neighbors and acquire a skill to speak to them in their language, but I, for one, had a great time. You can still be involved this coming year by taking the first course, and there will be a second course, and then on June 27th, there will be an all-day first course. Now, that's what I'm going to do again as a refresher course from the one I took this fall, and I hope to see many of you there. We also have experienced the vitality of congregations which have participated in Imagine No Malaria. And I am not going to reveal how much we have raised, because I'm going to let our wonderful field coordinator, Rachel Burkharm Ramafanger, be able to announce that a little later in our service here. But certainly people have experienced the fun, the joy, the love, the vitality of reaching out to others. And maybe you were surprised to learn about some of the people you know here in Northern Illinois who have actually had malaria. And so it's become something that's helped us as we have reached out and cared for our neighbors who have malaria. And now I want to say something about our need to grow and our capacity to reach out to LGBTQ persons and their families in all of our communities. I honestly don't know how you read this passage about Jesus and the Canaanite woman. Nestled in the scriptural context of Jesus' conversations with the religious authorities of his day on law and love, and not come out of it understanding that there are times when we have to change our heart. You see, Jesus was changed in this story. His heart was changed. And to hear the cries of so many around us over the years. Somebody gave me all the petitions that this annual conference has passed just since 2006. Calling on the general church, calling on some aspect of the greater church, calling on this annual conference, calling on somebody about the need for us to be welcoming of all people. There were 23 of them. I think somebody's shouting for mercy. And when we hear the cries of our members, clergy, and families, we need to listen and to care. Now, I understand we're not all on the same page on this. We have different perspectives and positions on human sexuality. And I respect my brothers and sisters who come from a different position from myself. But I also want to say that I think we need to all grow in our capacity to do at least one thing together. And that is to provide pastoral care to our LGBTQ persons and families, because they are in all of our churches. I'm going to have a gathering of clergy in September 9th. Clergy, put that on your calendar right now, where we're going to talk about, among other things, how it is that we can grow in our capacity to reach out to the unique needs of LGBTQ families and persons. And I hope that we will understand how it is that we come together from wherever we are positioned in all of that to grow in our awareness of reaching out to the people in our own communities, families, and churches. In my calendar, I write down, this is what you always have to title whatever you're putting in your calendar. I title it, What We Can Do. Because people are always talking about what we can't do. And there's a lot we can do. And there's even some things we must do. And that is to provide pastoral care. Jesus didn't require the Canaanite woman to disown her daughter. And some people have experienced that choice between their own children and their vows. Can you think of a more painful place to be? And so I am pleased and welcome in our midst, I think it's tomorrow night, Frank Schaefer, who had his credentials removed from him in another annual conference. He will be speaking at the Methodist Federation of Social Action dinner. And I encourage you to go. And, I almost encourage you to go, especially if you're somebody who may not be quite there. We need to listen to each other. I don't know if the banquet service can really accommodate all that, but somehow I think the Spirit can. And so he will be in our midst, and I invite you to welcome him. Now, there are also those talking about amicable separation in the United Methodist Church. And the call makes it sound as if, there's some action we can take that's going to take away all of our pain. Well, I don't believe that it will. I think it will damage our witness of our faith, and it will damage the mission of our church, It will incur a financial, missional, relational, and historic cost to the church. All the good we've done will be jeopardized and potentially destroyed. The benign use of the phrase an amicable schism suggests that there'll be some clear, clean, easy division. Now just think around your own Thanksgiving dinner table. Are there just like really clear, easy divisions? If so, it's an unusual family and you need to invite some others in. The hope is that I know there's a growing voice and strategy to find a way through. Because I would hope that nobody really wants us to split. And so the hope is that as that grows in the months to come, we will find a way forward so that the health and the strength of the United Methodist Church will continue. In the meantime, I ask you to pray for your church and to remember the good you've done and all the places you've done it and the ways that you've done it, and to think about the ways in which we've come through hard times. How would you have liked to have been the Congregational Development Director after the Chicago fire? That's a hard time. There have been all kinds of things that have happened in our history. It's a hard time. We're used to hard times. We're people who come out of adversity. And the way to do that is simply to follow the words that come to us from Ephesians, to bear one another in love and humility, gentleness, patience with each other, accepting each other with love and making the effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties us together as one body in Christ. Let us pray for each other, care for each other, listen to each other, and we love each other. Therefore, I believe our future with hope is making the dream of a church with more people, younger people, more diverse people, a reality in our midst, in every one of our contexts for ministry. I have a dream we'll keep our focus on the mission. That includes the children of our communities, giving ourselves to them so that they can have a hope for a future with a good education and love that feeds the body and the soul. I have a dream that will extend our arms far and wide to our Native American brothers and sisters, and to the cultural, ethnic, and racial diversity in our own communities and in our local churches. I have that dream. I have a dream that our hearts, your heart and my heart, will be changed like Jesus' heart, because we bring healing to our churches and our communities. And I have a dream. Yes, I still have a dream that we will not only meet our $1 million pledge to eliminate deaths by malaria, but we will blast right on past it, saving lives as we do. I have a dream with all the talents, the gifts, the passion, the unflagging spirit of this annual conference, that we can share the love and grace of Jesus Christ in ways that right now, sitting in this place at this time, we can't even ask or imagine. I have a dream. I have a dream that we will be like Jesus in our love for God and our neighbor. I have a dream. Will you join me in that dream? I have a dream.